There are moments in legal history when the story collapses not from the outside, but from within. This is one of those moments. For months, Prince Harry had been preparing for war. His target, the Daily Mail, one of Britain's most powerful tabloids. His weapon, a private investigator named Gavin Burrows, a man with 3 decades of experience in the shadowy world of surveillance, phone records, and personal secrets. Burrows was supposed to be Harry's star witness. He was the one who had claimed to know exactly how the Mail's reporters obtained private information about Princess Harry's then-girlfriend, Chelsea Davy. But in a twist that stunned the royal world, the star witness didn't just abandon Prince Harry. He joined the other side. Gavin Burrows sat down with Tara Brown of 60 Minutes Australia for his very first interview since the case imploded. And what he said wasn't just damaging, it was explosive. He called the entire legal battle the biggest scam in legal history. Let's rewind. Burrows is an old-school private eye. In his own words, he worked in the Wild West of the 1990s, when gathering information meant bending rules and sometimes breaking them. In a BBC documentary 5 years ago, he appeared to admit to blagging, tricking airlines or phone companies into revealing private details. He spoke about Chelsea Davy's voicemails being hacked, about surveillance on her communications, and about a culture of intrusion that Prince Harry later used as fuel for his lawsuit. But now, sitting in the bright Australian studio lights, Burrows changed his story. "Did you blag to find out Chelsea's flight details for the Daily Mail?" asked Tara Brown. "No," he replied. 180 degrees, a total reversal. And here is where the story gets darker. According to Burrows, he didn't switch sides for money alone, though money was certainly part of it. He was paid £75,000 by an organization called Byline Investigates to provide information that would help Prince Harry bring down the Mail. But then, Burrows claims, he realized the information he was giving was being twisted into something he had never intended. "I wasn't on any side," he insisted, but the record suggests otherwise. He worked with Harry's research team for a year before the trial. He was paid. He gave expert opinion. And then he had a crisis of conscience, or at least, that's how he tells it now. He contacted the Mail's legal team directly. Their surprise, he says, was genuine. But the lawyers were already too deep. They couldn't go back to the claimants and say they'd lied, Burrows told 60 Minutes. The claimants have been duped. Those are strong words. And if true, they don't just embarrass Prince Harry. They suggest that a 7-year royal vendetta was built on a foundation of shifting sand, or perhaps intentional deception. When the case finally went to trial, it didn't just fail. It collapsed in slow motion with the courtroom lights on for the entire world to see. Prince Harry had been convinced that the Daily Mail was guilty of phone hacking, illegal surveillance, and misusing private information. He brought in celebrities like Sir Elton John and Baroness Doreen Lawrence. Together, they formed a powerful front, but one by one, the pillars gave way. The court found that, in many instances, the evidence didn't support the claims. The judge's ruling was a devastating blow. Harry immediately called the verdict a whitewash, a word that echoed across headlines from London to Los Angeles. But his anger didn't help. In fact, it made things worse. The Mail's legal team, led by Anthony White KC, went back to court to demand indemnity costs, a rare punishment for improper conduct in litigation. They argued that Harry and his co-claimants had continued to attack the newspaper publicly even after losing the case, using their platforms to repeat allegations that had been rejected in court. White specifically pointed to a statement from Harry's spokesman that the prince stands by every word of his statement, despite the judgment. He also criticized actor Sadie Frost for suggesting on Instagram that the judge should have recused himself. These were not just personal remarks, White argued. They were part of a coordinated attempt to influence public opinion and undermine the court's authority. The financial numbers tell the rest of the story. A Associated Newspapers calculated its total legal costs at £34.4 million. The celebrities had legal insurance worth £16.2 million. That's £2.7 million each. But that still left a gap of more than £18 million. The newspaper group demanded an initial payment of £10 million within 14 days. Harry's own lawyer, Nicholas Bacon KC, called the costs eye-watering and noted they were £18.6 million higher than the court-approved budget. He insisted that the Duke of Sussex had brought the claim in good faith, that his evidence was accepted by the court, but that ultimately it fell short. Good faith, acceptance of evidence, falling short. Those are the words of a legal team trying to soften a disaster. But outside the courtroom, the reaction was far less forgiving. Former Daily Mail journalist Nicole Lampert, who had herself been accused by the Sussexes of using illegally sourced information, was scathing. She said the celebrities weren't fighting for principle, but for money. And about Harry himself, she delivered a line that will follow him for years. Prince Harry has a quite distorted sense of reality. He is both a toddler, throwing his toys out of the pram, and also incredibly gullible. Then there were the reputational casualties. Rebecca English, the Daily Mail's royal editor. Charlotte Griffiths, a former friend of Harry. Katie Nicholl, who was fighting cancer during the ordeal, all were dragged through years of stress, threats, and legal aggression. For what? For a case that ultimately revealed nothing. In the world of documentary film, this is the third-act twist. The hero discovers that the villain he was chasing is actually a mirror. And in Harry's case, the reflection showed a man who trusted the wrong people, spent millions of pounds, and still refuses to look away. So what happens next? The most important question is not whether Harry will appeal. His lawyers haven't ruled it out. The question is whether he can survive the financial and reputational damage. Dan and Brittany, commentators who have followed this story from the beginning, were blunt in their analysis. Harry, they said, has never understood the difference between press intrusion and press accountability. He grew up in a world where every headline was filtered through royal privilege. When negative stories appeared, he saw them as attacks from a hostile empire, not as the natural consequences of a public life. That mindset has cost him dearly. His lawsuits created a cult of personality around him, a lawfare strategy that seemed designed not to win, but to punish. Yet unlike his wife Meghan, who actually won her case against the Mail over the publication of her father's letter, Harry refused to accept that some stories are simply true. The irony is painful. Meghan's victory in her own case was seen by many as a legitimate legal win. Harry's loss, by contrast, was seen as a personal and strategic failure. And now, with a £10 million bill due within days, the royal couple faces a financial crisis that no amount of Netflix contracts or podcast deals can easily erase. Brittany from the Royal News Network put it succinctly. The only thing Harry really understands is a big bill. She's right. A painful financial penalty would not only teach him a lesson, it would also send a warning to anyone else tempted to use the courts as a weapon of personal vendetta against journalists. But the deeper tragedy is not about money. It's about the person Harry has become. He started his public life as the fun prince, the cheeky redhead who captured hearts. Now, after years of bitterness, conspiracy theories, and celebrity friendships, he has turned into something else. A man who surrounds himself with private investigators, handlers, and grievance peddlers. A man who cannot hear a criticism without calling it an attack. A man who, in his desperate effort to protect his family from the press, has lost the very trust he once wanted. Gavin Burrows said the whole thing was the biggest scam in legal history. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but in an era of disinformation, when a former royal heir can spend millions on a case that was built on the word of a man who later changed his own story, the word scam doesn't feel completely out of place. In the end, the royal dream wasn't shattered by the Daily Mail. It was shattered by the illusion that Prince Harry created around himself and the dangerous people he chose to trust. Epilogue. A silence that speaks. The head of Prince Harry's legal research team was asked for comment. There was no response, no statement, no explanation, just silence. And in that silence, the documentary closes with a question. If a prince cannot hear the truth when it comes from a court of law, how will he ever hear it from the world? The royal saga will continue. But this chapter is over. The crown may not be physically broken, but its reputation, in the eyes of millions, has never been more fragile. The courtroom doors had barely closed before the financial storm began. Prince Harry, Sir Elton John, and Baroness Doreen Lawrence were not just losers in court. They were being handed a bill that would make even the wealthiest celebrities pause. In December 2023, the High Court issued an interim order. The group must pay £10 million to Associated Newspapers within 14 days. That was only the advance. The total legal costs of the newspaper group had reached £34.4 million, and after insurance, the claimants were still on the hook for more than £18 million. For months, Harry's legal team insisted that an appeal was possible. But by the start of 2024, reports confirmed that no formal appeal had been filed. The prince had, in effect, accepted the defeat, though his public statements continued to paint himself as the victim of a corrupt press. But the most startling development came in January 2025, when Prince Harry settled his separate long-running lawsuit against the publisher of The Sun. After weeks of secret negotiations, his lawyers announced that Harry had accepted a settlement from News Group Newspapers, NGN, including an apology and substantial damages. That settlement was historic. It marked the first time Harry had won a significant concession from a major tabloid group. But it also drew a sharp contrast. He had won against NGN, yet lost catastrophically against Associated Newspapers' The Daily Mail Group. The two outcomes painted a picture of a man who could win only when the evidence was genuinely on his side. Meanwhile, the Daily Mail saga continued to haunt him. In mid-2024, court documents surfaced revealing that Harry and the other claimants had failed to pay the full £10 million on time, requiring a further order. By the end of 2024, the Mail's publisher confirmed that several claimants were still making installment payments, a humiliation for a royal who once boasted of his wealth and independence. Perhaps the most damaging real-world consequence came in the court of public opinion. Polls conducted in late 2024 showed that public sympathy for Harry and Meghan had reached an all-time low, even in the United Kingdom, where they once enjoyed strong support. The royal dream wasn't just shattered, it was being actively mocked. And what of Gavin Burrows? After his 60 Minutes interview, he gave no further media appearances. However, in October 2024, British newspapers reported that Burrows had been subpoenaed by a parliamentary committee investigating private investigators' influence on legal claims. He was ordered to appear, but did not. His silence spoke volumes. As the documentary camera pans over empty courthouses and tabloid headlines, one truth remains. Prince Harry's war against the press has not ended, but his credibility as a warrior has been deeply wounded. The settlement with NGN was a personal victory, but it could not erase the stain of the Daily Mail disaster. And the final irony? In February 2025, lawyers for Harry's own charity, Travelist, filed accounts showing a drop in donations following the legal battles. The costs of justice, it seems, are not just financial. They are also humanitarian.